Welcome to this meditation on the Stations of the Cross. Using words and images, we follow Jesus on his journey to Golgotha, the place of the skull. The readings and meditations that follow have been recorded by members of the congregation of St Andrew's Church from their own homes using whatever equipment they had during the coronavirus lockdown. The images that we use in this meditation were created by an artist called Cy Smith for an organisation called CPAS many years ago, and we use them very gratefully with his permission.
Stillness, quiet, space, peace. Stillness, let there be stillness. Quiet, let there be quiet. Space, let there be space. Peace, let there be peace.
Jesus prays alone. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Matthew 26, verses 36 to 46. Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. When they got there, he told them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." Jesus took along Peter and the two brothers, James and John. He was very sad and troubled, and he said to them, "I am so sad that I feel as if I am dying. Stay here and keep awake with me." Jesus walked on a little way. Then he knelt with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, don't make me suffer by having me drink from this cup. But do what you want, and not what I want." He came back and found his disciples sleeping. So he said to Peter, "Can't any of you stay awake with me for just 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you won't be tested. You want to do what is right, but you are weak." Again Jesus went to pray and said, "My Father, if there is no other way, and I must suffer, I will still do what you want." Jesus came back and found them sleeping again. They simply could not keep their eyes open. He left them and prayed the same prayer once more. Finally, Jesus returned to his disciples and said, "Are you still sleeping and resting? The time has come for the Son of Man to be handed over to sinners. Get up, let's go. The one who will betray me is already here." Stillness, quiet, space, peace. But not for him. Now the expectation is building, the wrestling, the struggle, the fear as the loneliness of the way ahead becomes painfully real as the others sleep. How can they sleep? How can they abandon him? How can they not feel the change in the atmosphere? How can they not feel the change in him? How can they sleep in the midst of the maelstrom? They would not let him sleep during the storm on the lake, yet now they sleep as a greater storm is brewing. A question rings around the garden. How can they not hear it? How can they not feel it? How can it not disturb their sleep? It whirls around the trees, bounces off the walls. It fills the darkening sky. It swirls around his head, pushes from his paws and shreds his soul. The question, if now, if no other, if unavoidable, if the only way, if your way, if me, if, so be it. The hour is here. There is no more time for if. There is only yes. It is the end of the beginning.
2. Jesus is arrested. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Matthew 26, 47 to 56. Jesus was still speaking when Judas the betrayer came up. He was one of the 12 disciples, and a large mob armed with swords and clubs was with him. They had been sent by the chief priests and the nation's leaders. Judas had told them ahead of time, "Arrest the man I greet with a kiss." Judas walked right up to Jesus and said, "Hello, teacher." Then Judas kissed him. Jesus replied, "My friend, why are you here?" The men grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of Jesus' followers pulled out a sword. He struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus told him, "Put your sword away. Anyone who lives by fighting will die by fighting. Don't you know that I could ask my Father, and right away he would send me more than 12 armies of angels? But then how could the words of Scripture come true which say that this must happen?" Jesus said to the mob, "Why do you come with swords and clubs to arrest me like a criminal? Day after day I sat and taught in the temple and you didn't arrest me." But all this happened so that what the prophets wrote would come true. All of Jesus' disciples left him and ran away. A kiss. The most intimate touch twisted into an act of betrayal. Is it love or hate, regret or disappointment, sorrow or indignation? A personal moment of vulnerability overshadowed by a baying crowd of violence and anger? Could there be a more vile, more corrupt, more perverse moment in human history? Yet he invited it, stood still and embraced his betrayer, welcomed the coming kiss, called him friend, his heart breaking as he whispered it in the ear of Judas. What would you do? What would your reaction be? Would you join those in flight? Would you turn and run in fear of the future, knowing you could make scant difference? Or would you stand with those whose instinct is to fight, to try anything to stop the inevitable from happening? Jesus accepts the betrayal. He accepts the future, knowing that the way ahead makes no sense in the eyes of the world. He is ready.
The Sanhedrin tries Jesus. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. Matthew 26, verses 57 to 68. After Jesus had been arrested, he was led off to the house of Caiaphas the high priest. The nation's leaders and the teachers of the law of Moses were waiting there. But Peter followed along at a distance and came to the courtyard of the high priest's palace. He went in and sat down with the guards to see what was going to happen. The chief priests and the whole council wanted to put Jesus to death, so they tried to find some people who would tell lies about him in court. But they could not find any, even though many did come and tell lies. At last, 2 men came forward and said, "This man claimed that he would tear down God's temple and build it again in 3 days." The high priest stood up and asked Jesus, "Why don't you say something in your own defense? Why don't you hear the charges they are making against you?" But Jesus did not answer. So the high priest said, "With the living God looking on, you must tell the truth. Tell us, are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" "That is what you say," Jesus answered, "but I tell all of you. Soon you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right side of God all-powerful and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest then tore his robe and said, "This man claims to be God. We don't need any more witnesses. You have heard what he said. What do you think? They answered, He is guilty and deserves to die. Then they spit in his face and hit him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, You think you are the Messiah, so tell us who hit you. Everything is closing in, voices bearing down, question after question, mutterings, accusations. He stands in silence. They lean in, poring over the stories, looking for a way out, a way to end it all, to be done with him. He stands in silence. They quote his own words to him out of context, making him out to be a terrorist, a blasphemer. He stands in silence. At times it feels like the walls themselves are closing in, whispering against him, lying, misquoting, hating. He stands in silence. Eventually the high priest has had enough and asks him straight, Under the oath of the living God, are you the Christ, the Son of God? It is as you say, he replies. They sit up. Most have given up hope of him ever speaking, but he knows the law. He speaks. He tells the truth. And now they have him. As far as they are concerned, it's over. All they need is the Roman stamp of approval.
Pilate tries Jesus. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. The reading is from John chapter 18, verses 28 to 40.
It was early in the morning when Jesus was taken from Caiaphas to the building where the Roman governor stayed, but the crowd waited outside. Any of them who had gone inside would have become unclean and would not be allowed to eat the Passover meal. Pilate came out and asked, What charges are you bringing against this man? They answered, He is a criminal. That's why we brought him to you. Pilate told them, Take him and judge him by your own laws. The crowd replied, We are not allowed to put anyone to death. And so what Jesus said about his death would soon come true. Pilate then went back inside. He called Jesus over and asked, Are you the King of the Jews? Jesus answered, Are you asking this on your own, or did someone tell you about me? You know I'm not a Jew, Pilate said. Your own people and the chief priests brought you to me. What have you done?
Jesus answered, My kingdom doesn't belong to this world. If it did, my followers would have fought to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. No, my kingdom doesn't belong to this world. So you are a king, Pilate replied. You are saying that I am a king, Jesus told him. I was born into this world to tell about the truth, and everyone who belongs to the truth knows my voice. Pilate asked Jesus, What is truth? Pilate went back out and said, I don't find this man guilty of anything. And since I usually set a prisoner free for you at Passover, would you like for me to set free the King of the Jews? They shouted, No, not him. We want Barabbas. He stands at the mercy of those who should be enemies, accused by his brothers. It had to happen. Ask yourself the questions put to him. Who is he? What has he really done? What kind of king is he? What is the truth of which he speaks?
Don't simply accept what others have said. What do you really know about him? Who do you see standing before you? What testimony could you bring before the governor?
Pilate condemns Jesus to die. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. The reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27. Jesus was brought before Pilate the governor, who asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Those are your words," Jesus answered. And when the chief priests and leaders brought their charges against him, he did not say a thing. Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear what crimes they say you have done?" But Jesus did not say anything, and the governor was greatly amazed. Pilate saw that there was nothing he could do, and that the people were starting to riot. So he took some water and washed his hands in front of them and said, "I won't have anything to do with killing this man. You are the ones doing it." Pilate set Barabbas free. Then he ordered his soldiers to beat Jesus with the whip and nail him to a cross. Pilate cannot do nothing. He has to make a choice. Silence is heard. Inaction does real damage. Hiding makes a statement. Turning his face, he is responsible. Washing his hands, he condemns. Declaring his innocence, he wields the fatal blow. Handing him over, he bears the guilt. Doing nothing, he does more than enough. Pilate makes a choice. Pilate does not do nothing. He makes a choice too. He accepts the way ahead. He does nothing.
We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Matthew chapter 27, verses 27 to 31. The governor's soldiers led Jesus into the fortress and brought together the rest of the troops. They stripped off Jesus' clothes and put a scarlet robe on him. They made a crown out of thorn branches and placed it on his head. They put a stick in his right hand. The soldiers knelt down and they pretended to worship him. They made fun of him and shouted,
"Hey, you, King of the Jews."
Then they spit on him. They took the stick from him and beat him on the head with it. When the soldiers had finished making fun of Jesus, they took off the robe. They put his own clothes back on him and led him off to be nailed to a cross.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
He stands bowed, bent in the heat, exhausted. Silent as they mock him, submissive as they shout, swear and strip him, still as they spit in his face and strike him. Meek as they ram a cruel crown deep into his scalp. His eyes look down, not wanting to look up into the face of the soldiers, not wanting them to see their reflection in his deep sadness, not wanting them to see what they have become, what humanity has become.
Blessed are the persecuted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
The laughter pierces more painfully than the thorns. The mocking bites deep into his soul. They play with him, dress him up, reduce him to an object. But his anguish is not for himself, but for the hardness, the cruelty, the violence that fills their hearts and minds, that they cannot hold back. His is a cry of love, not hate. His suffering is more than physical. His pain is as the pain of parents when a child turns on them in anger. Suffering born in deep, deep love.
Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you.
Jesus carries the cross. We do adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. John 19, verses 16 to 17. Then Pilate handed Jesus over to be nailed to a cross. Jesus was taken away, and he carried his cross to a place known as the Skull. In Aramaic, this place is called Golgotha. One among many, an ordinary man, a simple statistic, 1 foot after the other, spat at and laughed at. One among many, an ordinary man, on his way to his end, just like the rest, on a path countless have taken, and on which many will follow. Just another on the way to a brutal death, another tally on the register. Tomorrow he will be gone with all at the rest, one among many, an ordinary man.
Simon helps carry the cross. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
A reading from Matthew 27, starting at verse 32. On the way they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry Jesus' cross. An innocent man helps an innocent man. A man caught up in something that is none of his business. As Simon looks into his eyes, the glance reveals, for a second, something beyond the pain of the physical struggle, beyond the now. Nothing is said between the innocent men. He who brought healing to others accepts help, but gains no relief. Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He who invited us to share our load with him shares his load, but for him there is no rest. Anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. He who challenged us to take up a cross, to lose our lives, shares his cross with another and walks willingly towards the end of his life.
Jesus speaks to the women. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. Luke 23, verses 27 to 31. A large crowd was following Jesus, and in the crowd a lot of women were crying and weeping for him. Jesus turned to the women and said, "Women of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves and for your children. Someday people will say, 'Women who never have children are really fortunate.' At that time everyone will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us.' They will say to the hills, 'Hide us.' If this can happen when the wood is green, what do you think will happen when it is dry?" The women lined the way, mourning for the walking dead, for the last steps of sons, brothers and fathers. They mourn for the man they have followed, listened to, ate with, cried with, loved. He mourns for the world, for its people, for its tomorrow, for he has seen it from the beginning. He has witnessed its descent into corruption, greed and war. He has watched as it ripped itself apart in pride and hate. He has stared in disbelief as it plundered the riches that had been provided. He has looked on as it abandoned God and chose instead to worship religion and power. He has seen the righteous condemned. He had seen the weak beaten. He had seen the innocent murdered. He has seen the future, and it breaks his heart. He mourns for the world, for its yesterday, its today, and its tomorrow.
Jesus is nailed to the cross. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you've redeemed the world. Matthew 27, verse 35. The soldiers nailed Jesus to a cross and gambled to see who would get his clothes. The jeering has stopped. On a hilltop there is silence, stillness. Even the hardest heart misses a beat, knowing what is coming next. The soldiers who have done this many times cannot avoid squeezing their eyes shut for a second as they prepare for the first bite of the man-made spike. An arm swings. A sudden universal intake of dusty air. The ringing clang of hammer on nail. The voiceless scream as it tears skin and muscle, splinters bone. The thud as it bites into the wood on the other side. A moment's pain-racked peace before it begins again. Only he feels the final smash, breath sucked deep as he waits for the sharp ripping crunch as the upright drops into its socket, trying to hold on to a lungful of life before gravity and shock throw it out between cracked lips, and the struggle begins.
Criminals speak to Jesus. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. Luke chapter 23, verses 39 to 43. One of the criminals hanging there also insulted Jesus by saying, "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and save us." But the other criminal told the first one off, "Don't you fear God? Aren't you getting the same punishment as this man? We got what was coming to us, but he didn't do anything wrong." Then he said to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into power." Jesus replied, "I promise that today you will be with me in paradise." Desperate men at the end of desperate lives, needing some way of holding on to at least a scrap of pride. Soon enough, one turns on him. "Call yourself God? What kind of God are you? One that can't even save himself, never mind the rest of us?" But in that place, surrounded by agony, a long-buried sense of justice struggles up within another dying man. He cannot stay silent. A criminal names the wrong being committed, objects to the abuse. A criminal believes in him, speaking from faith and humility. In all that hopelessness, one man, a criminal, is given hope in return.
Jesus Christ cares for his mother. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. John 19, 26 to 27. When Jesus saw his mother and his favourite disciple with her, he said to his mother, "This man is now your son." Then he said to the disciple, "She is now your mother." From then on, that disciple took her into his own home. "A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Know the love of mother to son and son to mother. Be willing to love beyond yourself. Be willing to love for nothing in return. Be willing to love in the difficult times. Be willing to love without end. Be willing to be family. Be willing to be one."
Jesus dies on the cross. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Matthew 27, verses 45 to 50. At noon the sky turned dark and stayed that way until 3 o'clock. Then about that time Jesus shouted, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you deserted me?" Some of the people standing there heard Jesus and said, "He's calling for Elijah." One of them at once ran and grabbed a sponge. He soaked it in wine, then put it on a stick and held it up to Jesus. Others said, "Wait, let's see if Elijah will come and save him." Once again Jesus shouted, and then he died. My God, why have you forsaken me?" The darkness descending, the darkness of senses pushed beyond pain, the darkness of complete solitude. the darkness of total loss, the darkness of overpowering grief, the darkness of building fear, the darkness of growing uncertainty, the darkness of dashed hopes, the darkness of acute memories, the darkness of fading life, the darkness of ruptured history, the darkness of divine death, the darkness descending, the darkness.
"14. Jesus is laid in the tomb. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us." Matthew chapter 27, verses 57 to 61. That evening a rich disciple named Joseph from the town of Arimathea went and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate gave orders for it to be given to Joseph, who took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. Then Joseph put the body in his own tomb that had been cut into solid rock and had never been used. He rolled a big stone against the entrance to the tomb and walked away. All this time Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting across from the tomb. All is over. His life gone. The agony of the previous hour fades from his face before their eyes. The air seems strangely still as they carry his body down from the hilltop. The city is mercifully quiet after the chaos of the day before. They carry him to the garden cemetery. It's a sad purpose for such a place of beauty, a still space in the clamouring city that should be serene, but instead flows with aching grief. They lay him in the tomb and ask God to bring peace for him and for each of them as they face a new future. Across the plain, a holy day begins to break, a day of rest. Stillness, let there be stillness. Quiet, let there be quiet. Space, let there be space. Peace, let there be peace. Stillness, quiet, space, peace. Thank you for joining us for this meditation on the Stations of the Cross. May the Lord bless you in the in-between times, in the time of waiting for resurrection. May He be near you in the midst of grief and pain and sorrow. And may He raise you up as He raised up our Lord Jesus on that glorious Easter morn.